perhaps. All right, it's 7:05, so welcome everybody to our call tonight about randonneuring. Earlier in the spring, was talking to someone who is in the New York Cycle Club and was a randonneur, and they said, gee, it would be kind of cool if you did something new. And of course, something new we are going to do this year is run a ride during a pandemic, hopefully, the tail end of the pandemic. But we know it's something now that we have experience of the New York Cycle Club running most of its flagship offerings, rides and different programs. We know we can do it safely, and we're planning the ride to be very safe. But the suggestion was made, you might, 100-mile century is a cool pinnacle, but there are higher levels, higher mountains to climb, higher levels to achieve. And so this concept of randonneuring was introduced to me, not for the first time. I had heard about it before. I'm involved with another bike club that had an event with the Long Island Randonneurs. I couldn't make that. So I knew it existed, but I really didn't know much about it. I knew some members of both clubs that I'm involved with who had done these multi-day, really, really long rides. And I thought, I might be out to lunch and dinner and breakfast across several days on these rides. So I followed up and reached out. Because we had this 125-mile ride, I was advised that it would not be possible for them to be recognized because there's a whole set of things that it means to be a randonneur ride that we didn't think we would meet. And then as I reached out to the different groups, I met Paul Kramer, who's our guest today, and he gave me an explanation of it, which I felt like, I could, if I could tape it, then I could watch it a few times and remember it. So Paul, who is leading the New Jersey Randonneurs, you can see him and his bright yellow t-shirt. He really went above and beyond my expectations, became a sponsor of Escape New York, actually wrote a check, and we appreciate that, Paul, and offered to talk about it because we have somewhere around 100 people so far of our more than 550 that have registered for the ride who have chosen to do our new 125-mile double century ride. And we thought you might want to know that one of the other things Paul accomplished for us was he actually got it sanctioned. So it is if you do the ride, you can call yourself a randonneur, but there are some requirements. And without stealing Paul's thunder, I'm going to let him take you through them. So that was the reason for this meeting tonight is if you're curious like me, I asked Paul to start at the basic level and assume that you know nothing about it. And he's going to take you from there to the level that he has in his presentation, and then he'll be here to answer any questions that you all have. So with that said, I welcome you, Paul. The Cycle Club welcomes you. We thank you for what you've done, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Alan. So just full disclosure, my day job does not involve public speaking. So I'm a little stiff. I'm going to be reading from notes. I apologize, but I'll do my best. So as Alan said, I'm Paul Kramer, and I am the RBA or Regional Brevet Administrator for the New Jersey, New York City area Randonneurs, and I am sanctioned to organize brevets for this area, which are authorized by Randonneurs USA and most often by the Audax Club Parisien. So the purpose of my talk is to make sense of what I just said, because I understand probably none of that made sense. So as Alan said, Escape New York added a 200K to their choice of rides this year, and I think I'll have to wait till the Q&A to explain how one would get credit for that as an official brevet as opposed to just a 200K. That's not really part of my dog and pony show, but I'm happy to answer how that works afterwards, but it sort of falls outside of what I'm going to be talking about. So to follow up about what Alan said about century rides, for most people, that is like their ultimate distance goal. They work up to it, and once they achieve it, they might try to then get personal records, maybe do a hillier course, maybe do it on a fixed gear, add new challenges, but basically they don't go beyond 100 miles. So this 200K or 125-mile ride is sort of, while it extends the distance for those who are used to looking at the century ride as their goal, it's really the starting point for randonneuring. So it's, generally speaking, without adding asterisks and fine print, it's generally speaking the shortest ride in the calendar of brevets or randonneuring events. But randonneuring as a sport didn't begin with 200Ks. It ended with 200Ks in some way. It worked backwards from 1200Ks. And I'll tell my own story. It should just take a minute, explaining how I got interested in randonneuring. As you'll see, I'm hoping the details aren't common, but I think the general idea is common. And that is that back in 2004, when I was just I wouldn't say a club rider because I was never very fast, but someone who would go out on the weekends with friends and ride 50 miles, I was hit by a car and suffered a broken back and went a year without cycling. And this happened in May, and around about November, I was really feeling sorry for myself, and I was just looking at bike porn, specifically looking at other people's websites who had the same independent fabrication custom bike that I had. And I came across a website of a woman in New Zealand, a woman from Boston who was living in New Zealand at the time. And she showed a picture of her new independent fabrication and said, "This is my new bike for randonneuring, and I hope to ride it on Paris-Brest, Paris." Well, Paris-Brest, Paris was a hyperlink. I clicked on it, and I was hooked. So at this point, I'm going to go share my screen, if I can figure out how, and go to my presentation. So I don't.
You're looking good.
Okay.
You're looking very good.
Okay, so Paris-Brest, Paris is a bicycle race. It began in 1891. It's generally considered the oldest still being run bicycle event in the world. On the left, or my left at least, is the poster from that event, and on the right is the brochure from 2019. It's run every 4 years. There were some gaps for wars and such. The next one is in 2023. I overlaid some stats from 2019. As you can see from the poster, it's 1200K. So when I say randonneuring worked backwards from 1200K, this was the beginning of the sport. So first came this event, and the sport and the rules and the history and the procedures and more rules came out of it. So in 2019, as you can see, there were over 6,000 starters. So it's a very big event, and it would be bigger if they could handle more people, but it's done with a lottery, and some people, are closed out. So it would even be bigger if they could handle it. I think you can read the stats. I won't go through them, except to point out that you have to qualify to enter PBP. And that means in the year of the event, so before July 1st, I believe, might be 31st, you have to have successfully completed a 200, 300, 400, and 600K event, an official event. You can't just document your own rides. And when you see that 66 countries entered PBP, that means, I don't know if 66 countries have official randonneuring organizations, but probably more than 50. You know, I doubt a lot of these people travel to other countries to qualify. So Randonneuring is based in Paris, but they have sanctioned clubs all over the world. And in the United States, the organization is known as Randonneurs USA, and New Jersey Randonneurs, Long Island Randonneurs, Eastern Pennsylvania Randonneurs are all under the umbrella of Randonneurs USA. In this country, I think there's 55 different RBAs. There are regions from Alaska to Florida, from New England to Hawaii. So once you're involved in the sport and you go on a vacation, you can, you know, meet up with fellow randonneurs and get credit for a ride in their region. There's an award for people who have ridden more than 10 states. You know, it's a global phenomenon. I just want to point out the last stat that the average age for men was 50, and I'm going to come back to that really at the very last slide. So try to keep that in mind. So this is what I was looking forward to back in 2005 when I joined Randonneurs, with my goal being to go to Paris in 2007. So I was hoping to work my way up to that distance. I was hoping to qualify that year. And in fact, I did qualify. I did go to Paris. I was not successful in finishing. It rained a lot that year and it was very cold, but I probably, you know, wouldn't have finished anyway, given the level of my fitness. But anyway, there were other circumstances. So I was looking forward to riding through Normandy and Brittany with an international crowd and meeting people. Pictures like this definitely scared me a little bit. I knew that slower riders like myself would be getting maybe 3 hours sleep over the course of 90 hours. Ditch naps like this, or, you know, under a bush. There were stories about people who thought they were hallucinating because they saw fields of potatoes wrapped in tinfoil, and then they realized they were people in space blankets. But on the other hand, pictures like this definitely sold me. The idea of riding through the night, stopping in little villages for croissant definitely sold me and motivated me. And I had pictures like this in my garage, and I would go out every morning in the winter and ride on my trainer preparing for PPP. So what exactly, hang on. Okay, what exactly is randonneuring? So my definition is that it's self-supportive, non-competitive, against the clock, ultra-distance cycling. So by that, what I mean is you're not allowed personal support except at the checkpoints, or what we call controls. So just like the rides with Escape New York, about every 50, 60 miles, you have a rest stop, and a friend could meet you there, or, you know, a family member in an RV could meet you there even, but nobody can follow you on the course. No personal help between the checkpoints. However, you can get help from, you know, strangers, from volunteers who are working the ride, from fellow riders, bike stores, but you're expected to be able to, you know, do your own maintenance within reason, support other people, and it's not the type of event where the route is marked on the road and there's a SAG vehicle and, you know, someone's going to bring you back to the beginning if you decide to bail. The tradition is on being self-sufficient. By non-competitive, these are pass-fail events. You either finish within the time limit or you DNF, did not finish. There's no credit given for being fast or first. Results are always published alphabetically. There's as much or possibly more credit given to someone who barely makes it or even doesn't make it, but continues the ride anyway, knowing they're not going to make the cutoff. Someone who finishes beyond hours. I won't say it in French because my pronunciation isn't very good. But it isn't a race, and you'll hear that over and over and over again. You're supposed to enjoy it. You're supposed to treat camaraderie as above, finishing fast. And by against the clock, I mean every distance, whether it's 200K or 600K, has its own time limit, and the clock is always running. So the faster you are, the more time you can spend off the bike. If you're someone like me, you're always really up against that clock. I've done 600Ks, which are 380 miles without any sleep, 40 hours. I finished 39 hours, 40 minutes because I just didn't build up enough time in the bank to, sleep at a table like these people or on the side of the road like these other people. But, that which doesn't kill me makes for a good story. And, the harder it is, the prouder you feel when it's over. By ultra distance, I mean, again, starting at 200K. Excuse me. Now, this chart is here for a few reasons. The first is obviously just to convert kilometers to miles, and the second is to give you the time limits. So PBP has a 90-hour time limit, a 600K has a 40-hour time limit, etc. But the other reason I put this here is to show what it means in terms of a straight line, because I've done 600Ks in New Jersey several times that start in the Princeton area, they go down, to Ocean City, they kind of meander around, 380 miles, all in southern New Jersey. And if I go to work the next day and tell people, oh, this past weekend, I rode 380 miles all in one go, and they're like, where did you go? And I'm like, oh, around New Jersey. It doesn't sound very impressive. So I always try to explain to people, well, it was in New Jersey, but it's the equivalent of Manhattan to Montreal. And that's when they're like, oh my God, what do you mean? You got on your bike Saturday morning and Sunday night you got to Montreal? So this just puts it in perspective as far as what we're talking about. And in fact, the first 1200K in this country was Boston, Montreal, Boston, which ran from about 2000 and maybe 1999 or so to 2006, I think. So you can see it's 600 roughly from Boston to Montreal and 600 back, and there's your 1200K. Next July, New Jersey Randonneurs will be running the first New York, Montreal, New York, starting in Paramus. It was supposed to be 2 years ago, and we've canceled for 2 years straight because of COVID. But that's a 1200K on the calendar for next year.
So it says Manhattan. Can you count Paramus as Manhattan?
EMB started in Newton, and they finished like 30 miles from Montreal. So if they can be Boston, Montreal, Boston, we can be the New York area. And we're not going to Montreal, we're going east of Montreal. It's just easier to say.
Well, and if the Manhattanites come out to Paramus by bike, then technically
yes, exactly.
They're doing the right thing. All right.
Yeah, it's just a catchy name. So how do you find these rides? You go to rusa.org, and under search, you search for rides. You put in what state you're interested in, what region, what distance, what month. You can look at all the rides. There's a database of every ride that's on the calendar for that year. And keep in mind, again, this is the United States. There's rides all over the world. There's a calendar for the entire world. If you're traveling to Romania or to Japan, you could do a 1200K there. There's actually a 1,001 mile ride in Italy. I can't remember how many kilometers that is, but There are other rides even longer than 1200K. So a search will give you something like this. This shows all of the New Jersey rides for this year, plus some Eastern Pennsylvania rides, which go into New Jersey, because I must have done a search on New Jersey. And those two white lines in the middle show that we're still planning on a 600K next weekend and a 200K on September 11th from Fort Lee to Goshen. So when you sign up and register with us, and again, this is, talking in my own experience in New Jersey, things could be different in other regions. You'll get a Ride with GPS link, which you can download and upload to your device. You'll get a printed cue sheet, which is really, the Bible that lists all the cautions, and maybe it'll say bike store, off the route 1 mile, pothole at a certain mile, that type of thing, which might not be in the electronic version. And you can also see on the map, those brown squares indicate the different rest stops or controls. Those eyes mean an information control where you have to answer a question because there isn't a store there or a volunteer, but just to verify your passage through the route. These controls are put there to keep you from taking shortcuts. You'll also get a brevet card, which is where the word brevet comes from. It means a certificate or a diploma. This is just a little card that you take with you, and you get it stamped or initialed at each of the stops. And at the end, you sign it, and you get it back months and months later with a number on it, which has been entered in France. So all the results go to Randonneurs USA. Those results send them to Paris. Those results are sent to Paris. They're all gathered. Every finished brevet gets a number ever since, the beginning of time, since 100 years ago. And you'll get your card back with a sticker showing your, official number of that finish. This is a card from the 400K last weekend, actually. Okay, not sure why it's frozen. There we go. In order to participate, once you find a ride you're interested in, you do have to join Randonneurs USA. In the past, you could try out rides without joining, but for insurance reasons, our new carrier stipulates that you do have to be a member. I think it's $30 a year. But with your $30, you get the quarterly glossy printed American Randonneur magazine. You get the 165-page Randonneurs USA manual, and you get medals. You can get medals for completing a 200K, up to the 1200K. There are lots of different awards that people strive for, total mileage awards, or an award for riding a 200K for 12 consecutive months. The award I mentioned before for riding, more than 10 states. So people are in it not only for the glory, but for the medal as well. So I only have a few more slides, actually only 2 after this, and they are from this book that I came across. Gerald Marzorati, when he was in his early 50s, decided to take up tennis, hired a teacher and became very, very good for his age group. And actually won some, major tournaments, amateur tournaments in his age group. And I picked up a couple quotes from this book because they were very appropriate for randonneuring. And this circles back to the fact that the average age at PPP is 50. Because as we get older, and I was 50 in 2007, and that was one reason why, I latched on to randonneuring and PPP in particular when I broke my back, because I saw, oh my gosh, this event's going to happen when I turn 50. We're not going to get any stronger. You can lose weight, you can get a better bike, but you're not going to get more power just by training at some point. With randonneuring, however, age really isn't an obstacle for a long time. A previous RBA in New Jersey, Leroy Varga, qualified for PVP in 2007 and went to Paris and started PVP at the age of 80. And since then, there have been other 80-year-olds who have finished PVP. So the two quotes that I took out of the book was his advice to find something new, something difficult to immerse yourself in and improve at. So randonneuring really fits this bill because even at the 200K level, it's difficult, but you have to work at it to get the greater and greater distances. And you're definitely, immersing yourself in something. And by doing that, if I can get to the last slide, you counter the narrative of diminishment, which is what we all have in our heads. We just sort of take it for granted that things are just going to diminish and that we're going to get, slower and slower, and we're never going to be able to achieve what we used to achieve. But randonneuring, with its focus on endurance and self-sufficiency and not necessarily speed, does counter that narrative. And you do get better at it, and you can see your progress. You can see yourself doing longer rides, harder rides, faster times, more sleep, etc. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen if I can figure out how.
Well, I'll tell you that you disappointed me, Paul. You said you'd be done in 10 minutes, and you took 25. And you did a great job, actually. So I enjoyed it. And I want to ask you to talk a little bit sort of about our ride, just in terms of, for people who are planning to do the 125, what's sort of the deal that what you were able to put together?
Sure. It gets a little bit into the weeds, but it gets back to the different awards. So people work toward mileage awards. There's a K-Hound award for riding, 10,000 kilometers in a year. And all of the awards are based on official rides. These aren't like Strava or, Zwift or something. And there are only so many rides on the calendar. There are only so many weekends in the year. So in order to give people the ability to complete a ride that has been pre-approved, there's a program called the Permanent Program. And permanents are approved routes that you ride on your own, and you submit your results to RUSA, or RUSA. It's changed a little bit in the past year due to technology, due to insurance reasons. In the past, permanent routes were owned by individuals, and you would contact an individual and tell them, I want to ride your route next weekend, and they would meet you at the start and give you a brevet card. Now all the routes are managed by RUSA, and you could submit just an electronic proof of passage. You don't have to carry a brevet card and get it signed. You just submit to them a GPX file, ride with GPS file, Strava, whatever, and they'll look at it and they'll see if you got to your checkpoints. No, I don't even think you have to get to the checkpoints on time. You just have to finish the ride within the time limit and you get credit for it. So the ride on September 25th with Escape New York is a permanent. The route was approved by RUSA as an official 200K permanent. So if you follow the rules, which means you have to join Randonneurs USA and pay the membership fee, you have to, on the website, open a permanent account, which, isn't as scary as it might sound. And when you're done, you submit your results through that account. assuming you finish within 13 and a half hours, you get credit for it, and it shows up forever on your personal page on the RUSA website as a completed 200K, and you can call yourself a randonneur. Other rules are you are not to ride with people who are doing the other distances as part of the RUSA insurance. I don't know how that is, verified. I'm not too worried about it, but I have to say that legally, or according to our insurance, you're supposed to do a permanent with other people doing the permanent and not as part of a different group of riders, probably just to make it safer. Maybe people doing the 125K could start, half hour earlier, that type of thing. That's a minor point. Other than that, other than joining and opening that permanent account, it's really just riding and keeping track of your ride through some software where you could submit your results to RUSA when you're done.
So if people are interested, Paul, they're going to follow up with you to figure out how to join and make it all happen. By the way, that is what's going to happen. The 125s will leave about 30 minutes earlier. We were thinking about an hour earlier, but we realized that the George Washington Bridge doesn't open till 6 a.m. So letting people leave much earlier than 5:30 doesn't make sense. But,
yeah, one thing I didn't mention is that on a brevet, as opposed to a permanent, and you might have noticed this on the brevet card, each control has an open time and a close time based on a maximum speed of around 18 kilometers an hour, I think, and a minimum of 9.5, or maybe it's 18 miles an hour, actually. I'm not sure. Anyway, if you arrive at a control before it's open, you have to wait till it opens. So this isn't something that happens often. It hardly ever happens. On a very, very flat course with favorable winds, someone in a velomobile might have to wait. But the open time is, for a lot of reasons. I think it's to dissuade professionals. I think it's to make it a safer ride. And I think it's mostly so that the volunteers know when they have to show up at that checkpoint to welcome riders and not be worried that someone's going to be there ahead of them. You also have to arrive before the closing time. So technically, if between control 6 and 7, you have 4 flat tires, you could miss your cutoff for an intermediate checkpoint. And technically, you could be disqualified. It's really up to the discretion of the RBA or the ride organizer to, make a judgment call. Some people are softies like me. Some people might, hew more to the spirit of the French and, whatever. Generally speaking, if somebody, has technical problems, misses a control but makes it up and finishes on time, I give them credit for the ride. But it is a rule. Just thought I'd mention it.
cool. So I just want to remind everybody that I am monitoring the chat. So if you have a question, please, by all means, post it there. And at the moment, there aren't any. So we have Alex. Alex, I want to ask you to talk a little bit about your connection. So Alex Sid, who is our route designer for Escape New York, was vital to me being able to take the concept that was suggested and make it happen. And I think enjoyed. He's actually had to create a couple of versions of the 125-mile route by now, and hopefully this one is set. Alex, do you want to talk a little bit about your experience of randonneuring? You can go off mute.
Okay, microphone check. Can you hear me?
We hear you, and now we see you too.
All right, great. All right, yeah. So, well, Paul, hey, thank you. I think, Paul, we have met before in the past. I did the Cranberry 200K maybe like in 2013 or so, or 2012. So I just started doing cycling around that time. And what really I liked about the Randonneur was the fact that the distance wise, and like the camaraderie ship, it's like there's a whole group of people that are actually part of it, and they're really fun people, to talk to and just gaining a life experience. So if nobody's a member, definitely sign up. It's a great organization. Um,
I just wanted to build on something you were saying, Alex, which
yeah,
was when I talked to Paul before. It's like, if you think about it, the century was always the thing people aspired to, as Paul said at the beginning. And then this year, our big thing was like, let's add that sort of big cherry on top, 125. And for us, that's like a real stretch.
yeah,
For me, like I have to tell you, I mean, the century I've done, but 125 is a real stretch. And for the randonneuring, it's sort of just the entry point. So it almost feels like it's two very different worlds. But yet there are some people like yourself who've crossed over and really enjoy it. And I know some people who do these kind of things. So it's pretty cool. But I am curious. I want to ask one question, which is it true that when you have one of those brevets that's like Boston, Montreal, Boston, they go all the way there, put their foot down, turn around and go back? They don't actually get to enjoy the destination at all? Paul?
Uh,
It
it
depends.
depends. Well, like New York, Montreal, New York, the turnaround point, and it isn't an out and back, it's just a very skinny loop, a very vertical, skinny loop. You go up New York and down Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut. But the turnaround point is at a restaurant. So yeah, you get to, eat some French food, some Quebecois food, and then,
Poutine.
turn
Poutine.
around and come back. Yeah,
But
poutine.
you probably don't eat poutine because it's going to weigh you down.
Well, I'm a vegetarian, but I have had vegetarian poutine.
So we had a question, and it's a good time to throw it in there. You do something like New York, Montreal, New York, or long, long rides. How do you avoid getting bored?
Well, I saw Nigel Green's comment. Nigel is a longtime New Jersey randonneur, volunteer, ride organizer, and I saw him come across my screen. He said, "If you get bored, ride faster." Um, you do get bored. It's well. Let me say something before I forget, and that is there are many, many people for whom 200K is fine. It's enough. It isn't the case that everybody is working on, a 1200K, or everybody's doing a 200K in order to then do a 300K. There are a lot of people that enjoy that distance. Uh, they want to be able to enjoy the next day without being that sore, and that's fine. It's a big tent, uh, and 200K is no small feat. Um, but to get to your question, I'm not the first. I'm probably the 1 millionth person to say that it's 80% mental, and it really is. The lows are really low. You do get bored. You get everybody at some point or other stops and says, "Why am I doing this?" Like I don't remember why I chose to do this. And these rides are rain or shine, hot or cold, through the night. I've been lost all by myself before GPS in the pouring rain, in the dark, in New Hampshire, looking for a turn I couldn't find, for a half hour going up and down, looking for a turn in the woods. Absolutely miserable. So yeah,
I thought
but
I thought I thought a shorter answer might be Moby Dick on tape, right, or a book on tape.
well, you try to find people to ride with, and you sing songs or try
Are,
to
are you
play.
allowed? I mean, you can listen to music, you could listen to podcasts, you can entertain yourself, or is there any rules against that?
Well, as an RBA, I'm probably supposed to say you shouldn't be listening to things while riding.
Only one ear.
Yeah, but as a rider, I have an earbud in listening to directions, so I suppose I could listen to music too. But the flip side of being bored is that it really clears your head. You're also not thinking about your problems and not thinking about work and not thinking about what you have to do. It's like a cleanse, you know, it's, it's very liberating in some way. I don't know if it's the sleep deprivation or whether it's the monotony, but it's very meditative, especially riding through the night and all you see in front of you is a circle of light and that's it. And you hear a dog bark and you look to your right and it's like somebody put their hands over your eyes. You just see absolutely nothing, you know, just black unless you look straight ahead. And then suddenly you notice the sky is just a little bit lighter and then it's a little bit pinker and then you hear roosters and then at some point you realize you can turn your headlights off and it's an amazing feeling. If anyone only wants to do a 200K, I'd recommend finding a nighttime 200K because there are some, you know, and start at 10 o'clock at night because it's very enjoyable to ride through the night with other people where there's so little distraction and really so little stimulation, just the road right in front of you and the sound of the hubs, unless you have a Shimano rear hub and, you know, the company of the people you're with. It's very enjoyable.
Great. Well, Alex, did you want to say any more? Or I guess let me ask you this question before I ask Mike to chime in too, which is how do you sustain, what do you recommend in terms of, you know, hydration and sustenance and fueling yourself on a ride like this? Are there things to be careful about and not do so that, you know, in terms of weighing yourself down? We have a new sponsor who's coming on who's launching a new hydration product that worries about the way people eat sometimes on these rides can lead to GI issues and slow them down. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that. And then I'm going to ask Mike and Alex maybe to talk about your experience with longer riding and recommending people about how to sustain themselves on rides. So Paul?
Well, I'll say that any route takes into account the need for food and water. And if it can't avoid a long gap, there'll definitely be warnings, you know, at control 5, this is your last chance for 120 miles, make sure you get extra water and extra food. You know, these routes are very well planned. They're very as safe as they can be. You know, busy roads are avoided. They're tested. They're not designed with ride with GPS. You know, people go out and ride these routes at the hours that it's going to be ridden and changes are made if, you know, something doesn't seem safe. Or if it turns out there isn't, you know, a place to buy water for too long of a distance. So you're not just left, you know, to hang. I will give one anecdote, and that is when I first started, or shortly after I started randonneuring in 2005, I got into this liquid food, you know, like this Perpetuum or whatever, you know, you'd add to your water bottles. And I was really into it, and I was going to Canada for a 600K. In fact, I needed the 600K to qualify for Boston, Montreal, Boston, because it was the last one on the calendar I could find. And I didn't know what to do about all of this powder that I had to carry with me. So I mailed a box of white powder, and this is before 9/11, to some little restaurant in Ontario and asked them to hold it for me. And at 2 a.m, I showed up really tired. The clerk handed me my box. I opened it up, looked at it, and threw it in the garbage. And that was it, you know. Now I just eat whatever I want to eat, ice cream, you know.
I thought you were going to tell me the RCMP were waiting for you with handcuffs.
So everybody's different, you know. I've seen everything. I've seen people that carry bags and bags of powder and mix it at the rest stops, and I've seen people eating, you know, a steak in a diner, sitting at the counter. So it's really what works for you.
Alex, do you want to chime in with some thoughts?
Yeah, along with that, you know, hydration is obviously definitely important. You should be drinking, you know, about 5 to 15 minutes, pretty much. And then also the other thing is also pacing. A lot of people, they don't know how to pace properly. So, you know, it's very important to like, you know, pace it on up the hills as well as down the hills and on the flats. If it's a windy day, also, you want to pace yourself properly. So you shouldn't really be breathing heavily. If you are, that means you're just going way too hard. So you just need to tone it down. So for me, I think pacing is going to be really important, just as much as also hydration. Um, and
So,
then you should.
Mike, what do you want to chime in on in terms of your experience?
I would say in regards to pacing, if you could take a look at the route beforehand, that's really a good idea, because then you could kind of see where the climbs are and you could kind of gauge how you're going to do. So if you're doing a ride with a lot of climbing, you don't want to go out too hard at the beginning. That way, you can save some stuff for the hills and you're not killing yourself. So that's one thing I would say. With hydration, everyone is different. Some people can eat big meals, some people can't. I would say is whatever you've been using, don't change it right before the event, because that's when a lot of times you'll have a lot of problems. And I would say don't eat stuff that will bother your stomach. So, like for example, sometimes people won't eat the fiber or salads because that might go through your body, and if you're out in nowhere, you might not be able to get to a bathroom in time. I would say if you could get a drink mix with that has carbohydrates, that's something good, because that'll give you a lot of calories and keep you up and keep you a little stronger. And then just eat stuff that's that you feel that will be good on your stomach and everything.
Thank you, Mike. So I don't think you fully answered the question, and I want to throw a dimension to it in terms of safe riding at night. And I was thinking about, if there's any recommendations with respect to illumination and clothing and how to, be more visible. I've participated in some interesting debates on that, but, and then also in terms of the weight of what kind of attire, is it the Lycra set? How do people dress for these long rides? And I guess it also depends on the weather.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely can't be a weight weenie on the longer rides because, the range and temperature could be great. There could definitely be rain in the forecasts. I've ridden in the snow. Although there are people that really are minimal. When I went to PBP, I was shocked at how so many Europeans had like a little flashlight strapped to their fork, and I looked like a Christmas tree. I can't get enough light, but lighting is one of the biggest, subjects that randonneurs love to talk about. And it's really changed over the years from halogen to, LEDs. A lot of people have dynamo hubs. I ride with a dynamo hub, so I'm generating, my own electricity for my front lights. And during the day, I can charge my phone. Some people choose to have a lighter wheel. They think that the dynamo, slows them down, which isn't very scientific, but whatever. So they choose battery, lights, and when they stop at a rest stop, they try to, charge up their lights or their phone. It's a really big topic. It's hard to even scratch the surface of lighting, other than to say you need good lights, obviously, especially for the descents. But there's some excellent, you have to spend a little money like any sport you get into, whether it's golf or rock climbing or whatever. There's some investment in lights if you're going to be doing, a 200, 300, you can get away without lights depending on the region and the time of year and your speed. But once you get into a 400K, you're definitely going to need lights. You have to have reflective vest. You have to have reflective ankle bands. You have to wear a helmet. Ever since my accident in 2004, I wear high vis even indoors. I don't go without a high vis t-shirt because you never know. You need a taillight, a working taillight, a backup, and there are inspections before the ride begins to make sure everybody, has these things. So, safety is definitely a concern.
And reflective piping, I guess, on your clothing couldn't hurt, right?
Nothing
Right.
hurts, but you need a reflective vest or a sash. It can't just be like,
Right.
a little line around your cuffs or something. But
My favorite purchase, I was on the DC ride one year and I bought an entire jacket that was made out of that material. And whenever somebody would take a picture of me at night with a flash, all you'd see is that jacket.
oh yeah, definitely.
Pretty cool. All right. Any more questions? I think really we have people saying well done and thank you. And we're at a good time to say I want to thank you, Paul, for your support and for your participation tonight. This recording will be made available to those who couldn't make it, and I'll get you that link once we have it somewhere. And so I want to thank everyone. We started with about 24 and we ended with about 24, peaking at about 28 people. So you captivated their attention, and I thank you for it. And I look forward to, hopefully you'll make it to the ride. I know that's still up in the air whether you'll be available to join us.
Okay. Well,
All
good
right.
luck.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mike and Alex, too, for participating.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Night,
Thank you.
everybody.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.